All right, guys, for today's lesson, you're going to find it, I think, really easy. So, we're going to take what we've learned about rational expressions and we're going to add just one little piece to it. And that piece today is called excluded values, which you guys already know a little bit about excluded values. And it's just applying that concept to rational expressions. So, excluded values are like when you solve the answer, but it looks like it could be the right answer. However, there's certain numbers that you can plug in that would make the denominator equal to zero, and you can't divide by zero because there's a divide by zero error. So if you look at this first expression, you want to factor out up top in the numerator, the 10, and then pull out. So you got a squared minus 4. Okay. And then down below, if you look here, see if you got a GCF between these numbers, 10, 4, 32. So I know my GCF there is going to be a 2. So I'm going to rewrite it as 5a squared minus 2a minus 16. Okay, and then I want to look further and see, well, do these parentheses break down any further? And in this case, they are going to break down further. So up top, we still have, that 10 out front. But a squared minus 4, this is a difference of squares. When you have a difference of perfect squares, meaning you got a squared term, and then you have your constant in the back, and you have no variable in the middle, that means it's going to factor further, because what happens is one's a plus, one's a minus, which eliminates that middle term. So a squared minus 4 factors out to a plus 2 times a quantity, a minus 2. Okay, now on the bottom, this one's a little bit harder to factor out, but it is going to. So we got 5a, and I know that one's going to be a because that's the only way to get 5a squared. And then I need different combinations that are going to multiply to negative 16, but add to negative 2. So that tells me that one has to be a positive, one has to be a negative. However, it's finding that right combination. So with 16, we know we got 4. You could use, so 4 and 4, 2 and 8, 1 and 16. So now I just need to find what works. Okay, so if I take 2 times 5, that's 10, minus the 8. Yeah, that could possibly work. But I think that this needs to be a negative 2. And this one here needs to be a positive 8. Okay, so when I'm go ahead and work this one out. Sorry, the phone's ringing. 5a times a is 5a squared. 5a times negative 2 is negative 10a. 8 times a is positive 8a. So that is going to work because that gives me that negative 2a. So this is going to be totally factored out there. Okay, now when I'm looking for excluded values, I need to look before I start crossing things out, before I start simplifying. And I'm thinking, what numbers can I plug into these variables to make the denominator equal to 0? Well, if you have any variable outside that's pulled out as a GCF, 0 is going to be one of your excluded values. But we don't have that in this case. So what I want to focus on right now is what number can I plug in right here to make this parentheses equal to 0. And again, if you can't figure it out mentally, you could just take that parentheses, set it equal to 0, and then solve. Okay, so a, negative 8/5 or negative 1 3/5, that is one of my excluded values. That means if I plug a negative 1 3/5 in for a, it's going to make this resulting parentheses equal to 0, which anything multiplied by 0 is going to result in 0, and you can't divide by 0. So that's why that's called an excluded value. We have another excluded value right here, and this one's easier. It's just thinking, what number do I plug in for here to make that parentheses equal to 0? Well, that's going to be a positive 2. So before I start simplifying, I find my excluded values. Okay, so I'm going to say right here, EV. Sometimes I'll say EV, excluded values. So my excluded values are -1 and 3/5, and then +2. In terms of today's work, they're going to even put it like a little bracket there, which stands for excluded values using this method here. Now, your excluded values, you could have none, perhaps. You could have 1, you could have 2, you could have 3. So there's really no limit there. All right, and then I'm going to see, well, now this is going to simplify further. So I'm like, okay, that simplifies with this. And because these 2 and 10s are outside, this 2 cancels out, and that leaves you with 5 right there. So my final answer is going to be, I've got 5 up top times the quantity a plus 2, and on the bottom we have 5a plus 8. Okay, again, this 5 cannot cancel with that 5 because this 5a is attached with that plus 8. So that's my final answer with my excluded values. Okay, moving on to number 2. So number 2, let's start off with up top there. I know I can definitely pull out a GCF, 4, 36, and 56. My GCF is going to be a 4. So a squared plus 9a plus 14. Okay, and then I'm going to look at the bottom here. 6, 48, and 42. I know there's a 6 that's a GCF, and then a bunch of a's going on here. They all share at least 2 a's, so I can pull out a squared. And then I rewrite what's left, so that'd be a squared plus 8a plus 7. Okay, check these out here, see if they reduce further, which it's going to. So I've got my 4 up top. Break up this one into 2 parentheses. 2 numbers that multiply to 14 but add to 9. That's going to be my plus 7 and plus 2. On the bottom, let's see, this breaks up further. So 2 numbers that multiply to 7 but add to 8. That's going to be a 7 and a 1. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit easier to determine my excluded values. So for this one here, my excluded value, because I have this a right here that's pulled out, if I plug a 0 in there, 0 squared times 6 is 0, which would make this whole denominator equal to 0. That's one of my excluded values. And then I'm thinking, what do I plug in right here? Well, to make this part equal to 0, that's going to be a -7. What can I plug in here to make this equal to 0? And that's going to be a -1. So starting off, my excluded values are 0, -7, and -1, which means you can solve this, but you can't have that as a possible answer when you plug those back in for the variables. Okay, now I need to simplify further. So this cancels with this. And this 4, I know that 2 goes into 4. It also goes into 6. It goes into 4 twice. It goes into 6 3 times. So that's as far as you can reduce it. So up top, you got your a plus 2. Multiplied by the 2 up front here. On the bottom, you have a 3a squared. And then you have multiplied by the a plus 1. So that right there is our answer. Okay, number 3. Checking up top here, there is no GCF for the top or the bottom. So we can start right away and just breaking this up. I know it's going to be 2 numbers that multiply to -72 but add to +1. So it's going to be r plus 9 and an r minus 8. On the bottom, almost the same thing, but adds up to a +17. So that's going to be an r plus 9 times an r plus 8. Okay, that's not going to factor any further. So I can go ahead and write down what my excluded values are. Right here, to plug in right there to make this equal to 0, that's going to be a -9. And then right here to plug in to make that equal to 0, that's going to be a -8. So my excluded value is going to be -9 and -8. And when I go ahead and simplify, r plus 9 crosses out with r plus 9. And then I'm left with these two. I can't cross those out because they're not the exact same. So my final answer is r minus 8 over our plus 8. All right, I think we'll do one more together and then turn you loose. So looking at the top here, I see some big numbers, 27, 45, 18. I know that they all at least have a 9 in common, and then they all share at least one v. So put back what's left. So 3v squared minus 5v, and then plus 2. On the bottom, 63, 126, 63. So 63 is going to be your GCF there. And again, they all share at least one v. So put it back. You got v squared minus 2v plus 1. So I see both those parentheses will factor further. So put a 9v. So I got 3v. And then a v for that. And then 2, there's only one way to get 2 times 1. But the question is, does 2 go here? Does 1 go there? I know that it is a positive, but it's also a negative in here, which means both of those have to be a minus. And then what can I multiply to get to negative 5? Well, if I put a 1 here, negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. Put a 2 here, negative 2 times v is negative 2. Those add up to negative 5. Okay, on the bottom, 63v. And then this one's a little bit easier to factor out. So v and v, 2 numbers that multiply to positive but add to negative 2. So it's going to be a negative, and it's both going to be negative 1s. All right, now if I look for my excluded values, because this v is outside the parentheses right there, 0 is going to be one of them. And then for this one to plug in, to make this parentheses equal to 0, that's going to be a positive one, which happens to be the same thing for the other one. But I don't need to write that twice. Okay, just because it works for both, you just leave it. So 0 and 1, I don't need to write that one more than once. Okay, let's go ahead and cross out what they share. So those go. And then this 9 goes into 63, so it goes in 7 times. And this v cancels with this v. So what you got remaining up top is just that 3v minus 2. On the bottom, you had that 7 outside, and then being multiplied by v minus 1. Okay, so that's going to be our final answer for that one. All right, we're going to skip 5 and 6, so why don't you guys go ahead now and do number 7. And again, when you're looking at these, the ones in brackets, those are your excluded values. Okay, number 8. Number 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. And 16.